Hey guys, Alex Chemarov here at Movements for Life. Gonna go through another core matrix here. This time it's gonna be a little different. We're gonna do it in the standing position. Many of you guys, I'm sure, are very well versed in different tools and different positions and doing training your core. So whether you're prone in the plank position or supine, whether you're using a medicine ball or a Bosu or a stability ball, either or, there's more than one way to cook an egg, so to speak. So this next variation is going to be standing, it's going to be upright, and we're going to do it in all three planes. I have to give credit to the Gray Institute for a number of years ago for exposing me to their concepts and methodology, which continues to inspire me today. So thank you. Also to Todd Wright at Train for the Game. He introduced and coined the term the vertical core at a Perform Better Summit a long, long time ago, which continues to obviously influence us today because it's very pertinent. So that said, vertical core standing from the upright position is going to be vitally important because that is where life takes place, especially in sport. In sport, if you're laying on the ground, then you're probably not succeeding too well at it. So that said, vertical core, we're going to start with sagittal plane. A quick thing with the sagittal plane, because you're going to be reaching, it's going to be a punch matrix overhead, and hip motion becomes really, really important because as I start driving the dumbbells overhead and back, I have to really make sure my pelvis translates and moves forward. So I need my belly button to be able to move forward, and at the same time I'm actually going into a posterior tilt. So it looks like I'm leaning back at my upper body and really going through lumbar extension or hyperextension, but in truth, I'm going through a posterior tilt, and it's my pelvis that is creating that angle where my upper body is leaning back. And then I want to think about reaching how tall and long can I get through the arm as opposed to punching towards that back wall. All right, and that's going to create a nice loading through my abdominal wall and hip flexor complex. So it's going to look something like this. We're going to alternate the arms. So how tall and long can I get? Making sure my hip translates forward, and it also rotates by going into a posterior tilt. So here's our sagittal plane at overhead. We're going to go through three targets for today. Frontal plane, I'll give you a different view just so you can see what the pelvis is doing. Same concept, it needs to translate by moving to each side, and then one hip is getting higher than the other, so my hip is actually rotating as I'm going through some lateral flexion. So the arm is reaching overhead, and I got great loading sequence or stretch going through my lateral core. And then last but not least, transverse plane, we're going to go same side rotation, so I'm going to open up and punch back. I'll give you guys a couple of different views here. Great pec stretch, ton of oblique, obviously a ton of rotation, so it's going to look something like this. Winding up the hips, getting a nice posterior hip stretch. Give that a whirl, give it a try. Really challenging, really fun. I know it looks a lot like a arm and shoulder matrix, and by definition it is. It's a punch matrix, but quick little footnote. Years ago when I first got into the industry, activation of the core involved shortening the abdominals, right? Or any muscle for that matter. How can you activate? By engaging, by activating, squeezing. And the concept now is very much different because it's more about how well can you load a particular muscle. The loading sequence is that eccentric lengthening. So in this case, as I reach up and back, here's my abdominals being put on stretch or being loaded. And we cannot unload a muscle if you can't load it. Think of it, if I tell you to jump, you first have to go down before you can go up. So we call that here like the George Costanza method. Everything that we learned way back when, not that it wasn't pertinent, it's a little bit of the opposite now in terms of how do you load, how do you activate. So with that said, have fun with this. If you guys have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks guys.